Hey everyone, I'm Lauren. I'm the one who's been organizing all the webinars. So this one right here, as I'm sure you all know, it's going to be an opportunity for all of us to kind of learn from one another, to get ideas about environmental projects and to learn how other people implemented theirs. So it's a great opportunity to ask questions. As you see, there's a chat function right here that I wrote in before. You can also ask questions in there. You can ask them during presentations. You can ask them afterwards when the people ask for questions. Just make sure that you aren't afraid to ask any questions if you want to. So this is organized for the College Network for Green Allies. So before we get started, there are other ways to get involved in the network. First of all, you can officially register your environmental club at your school for the network. As you'll see, there's like a little red one next to the handout thing. I put a little thing in there where you can click on links next to all these things that I'm going to mention, so you can register your club through that. You can just kind of see what other clubs are working on if you're a part of the network, and you can get in touch with them. You can also put a project that you might have done yourself into our database, so you can kind of get inspired by other schools, and they can get inspired by you. It's just a way to connect. You can also join our Facebook group and our newsletter. Both of those are also links in the handout. And we also have networking events. Our big one is the annual conference. This year it's going to be, or next year it's going to be at Swarthmore in Philly. There's also information about that on the Facebook group and in the newsletter. And I also linked a page to our website so that you can get information about that if you're interested. So for this webinar, the schedule is going to be, we're going to have Emma first, who's from Lafayette in Easton, PA. She's going to be talking about a food recovery program that she did. And then we're going to have Kristen and Sophie, who are from the University of Delaware. And they'll be talking about an herbicide use reduction campaign at their school. And then we're going to have Kyle, who's also from Lafayette. And he's going to be talking about how to actively get speakers and how to create events at your school. So first, we are going to have Emma. So Emma, if you could just turn your camera on. You just click the little thing. Oh, awesome. Cool. So I'm going to get off, and then you can talk.
All right. Thanks so much, Lauren. So as you mentioned, I'm Emma Stierhoff. I go to Lafayette College, and I'm involved in a food recovery program on campus. And food recovery is essentially the redistribution of food that would normally go to waste to people in the area who are facing hunger and who need it. So this is a program that we really just got started this past semester. So it's really in its beginning phases, and there's a lot to be done still. But we've gotten through a lot of the organization planning, and we've at least gotten to the implementation stage. So I'll get to speak about some of that. So food waste is a really multifaceted issue, and it would take me hours to completely cover every aspect of it, but it essentially occurs on every level of food production, processing, distribution, and consumption. And food recovery aims to work with the distribution aspect of that. So I'm just going to throw some statistics at you guys. 40% of food produced in the US goes to waste and ends up in landfills. That amounts to 60 million metric tons and $162 billion worth. Also, the average American wastes 1.2 million calories, every year, which is enough to feed another person. Also looking at this just in the Easton area, 12% of residents in Northampton County, where Easton is located, are food insecure. Also in Lehigh Valley, 1 in 10 people rely on visits to food banks, and 1 in 3 kids face hunger. And also, according to Nancy Walters, who works with the Easton Hunger Coalition, there are 11 food pantries, 5 free meal centers, and 3 shelters in Easton, which really speaks to the amount of food insecurity that people face there. So it's a really extensive issue in the United States, and it has environmental consequences, social consequences, and the fact that people are facing food insecurity, even while people are also throwing out this much food, is really a case of injustice, and it's something that we're aiming to combat with our food recovery program. So in our first steps, a classmate came to me back in December, Eric Laux, and he proposed a program where we would donate our extra meal swipes every week, because a lot of students don't use all of their meal swipes, And so those meal swipes would be cashed in to make a donation to one of the local shelters in Easton. However, that proposal got turned down. It brought up a lot of technical issues that our dining services didn't want to deal with. But as a counter proposal, somebody proposed a food recovery program. So we decided to take that and work with it. So the first step of this was really organizing all of the individual efforts that were happening at the time. There were a lot of different organizations on Lafayette that wanted to work on this issue, but everybody had a different idea of how to get it done, how it should run. And because these groups weren't communicating, it just wasn't happening. So our first step was to have a huge meeting to just bring everybody together, have a brainstorming session, and make sure everybody was on the same page with it. This included dining services, all of the clubs involved, the environmental clubs, the Commons Council that Eric is on. So lots of different groups were getting involved with this. And then during this meeting, we also discussed whether or not we wanted to join the Food Recovery Network, which is a nationwide coalition that started at the University of Maryland. And it's basically a coalition where a lot of schools that have food recovery networks join, and they get support, they get funding, they can communicate with other schools that have similar programs. So we decided after this meeting to join this, and we became a chapter in the Food Recovery Network after 2 recoveries. Another big thing that we did in preparing to implement this was communicating with other food recovery leaders at other schools, such as Case Western, Roger Williams, Carleton College, and other schools that have implemented food recovery networks. And this really helped us get ideas for how we should run ours and what has worked, what hasn't, and learn from their experiences and use what they've dealt with to make our recoveries run smoother. And then lastly, we really needed to meet with dining services and work out logistics, make sure they were willing to give us the food when we wanted to pick it up, and also make sure we were fulfilling the food safety standards that they wanted us to. So making sure any allergens would be marked on the boxes, and also making sure food stayed within the proper temperature, not in the danger zone, which is when it gets too hot and it's no longer safe to eat. And we also needed to decide where to deliver the food in Easton. There are a lot of places down in Easton facing food insecurity and a lot of people who don't get enough to eat. So we just decided to pick Safe Harbor Shelter, which is a homeless shelter right down the hill. And part of the reason why that worked was because there's already a van that goes there twice a week. So we could just coordinate with that van that made the trip and deliver the food to that van, which in turn delivered it to Safe Harbor. But we're hoping in the future to expand to other organizations down in Easton as well as we become more successful as a program. So in terms of implementation, as I mentioned, we organized with this van. It's called the Landis Van. It's the volunteer organization on campus. And since that Landis Van was already going down, we coordinated that dining services would give us the food every Monday at 7 p.m. And we essentially were the middle line between the two. So we delivered the food from the dining hall to the van, which in turn delivered it down to Safe Harbor in Easton. So myself and 6 others and our 2 sustainability leaders on campus, Miranda and Marie, ensured that there was always that middle line between the two, and that there was always a group going to bring the food, weigh it, deliver it, mark any allergens, and make sure that transitioned smoothly. And our first recovery, we recovered 36 pounds of food from the grab-and-go type dining halls, the things that were already packaged, so like soups, sandwiches, fruit cups, yogurt parfaits, that kind of thing. And after 8 recoveries over the course of the semester, we've recovered 864 pounds of food. And a lot of the really great successes that we've had have been large campus-wide events like Earth Week, the alumni reunion, and commencement, where they have a lot of leftover food from these events, and especially commencement and the reunion when it was over the summer and there was no one there to eat it afterwards. We were able to get all of that leftover food down to Safe Harbor in Easton and make sure that people who needed it got it. And so some problems we faced in beginning this implementation, since we were limited to 1 day a week, we knew that there was food being wasted towards the later parts of the week, but we just couldn't get it in time because it wouldn't have lasted until the following Monday. So we're hoping in the future to expand to do recoveries more than 1 day a week, perhaps even every day if we can build it up enough. And that would ensure that no food ever gets thrown away if it is good enough for other people to eat it. And also there was 1 week where dining services, oh, by the way, we're with Bon Appetit, if you're wondering. They're our dining service provider. And there was 1 week where we're not given anything from Bon Appetit. And we were concerned that there wasn't enough communication going on between them. And they told us that it was because they realized that they were producing too much and they didn't want to waste any materials. So since they realized after we recovered so much food that they needed to lower their production, they did that. But afterwards, we had a meeting with them, made sure that we were all on the same page. And we had a really good meeting, talked about the future. They had a lot of good ideas for how to implement it in the future. So that ensured that they were still on board. And there was also 1 week where the van did not go down. And 2 of our volunteers, Eric and Danny, had to walk it. But since it's so close, that worked out fine. And they were happy to see new faces and really thankful. So it still worked out well. So even though we faced some ups and downs, it's overall works really well. And moving forward, we need to decide whether we want to become a new club or join an existing club on campus. There already is a club that deals somewhat in food waste. They have a farm off campus that they go to every week to volunteer. So we might join their ranks and operate underneath them, which would make it easier to organize efforts because there are already so many environmental clubs on campus that communication is already a bit difficult between them all. So consolidating that effort could be beneficial, but also becoming our own individual club under the Food Recovery Network might help us really get our momentum going. So there are pros and cons to both sides that we're still weighing, and that's a decision that we've been working on making this summer. And also in the future, we want to work with more organizations in Easton. There's also a shelter for women and children called Third Street Alliance that we would love to work with once we get enough food to recover. And also there's a lot of food insecurity faced by students and children in Easton. Going to school, they just don't have enough food to get there, and they also don't have healthy food to eat. So if we could expand to that and make sure that they're getting the food that they need, that would be really great. So as we're expanding the amount of food we're recovering, we're hoping to get also the buffet style dining halls and not just the prepackaged meals. And once we do that, we're thinking there will be a lot more food to bring down. And also once we're recovering several days a week and we'll have food to bring down possibly every day, every other day, we'll be able to coordinate with a lot more organizations. And we also talked about potentially working with restaurants in the area and getting them to recover their leftover food, because there are a lot of restaurants just off campus that definitely have leftover food that goes to waste. So we could potentially work with them as well. And also over the last semester, we've gotten a lot of volunteers interested in joining this. As I said, there were a lot of different groups talking about implementing this. And so we kind of finally brought it together, but we have interested volunteers from all of those different groups, which will become easier to organize once we become our own entity. So we're hoping that next year we'll be able to train those volunteers over the 7 or 8 people who were leading these efforts this past semester. And every day we'll have one of those leaders going out with the new volunteers and making sure everything runs smoothly. But at the same time, efforts won't lie all in those 8 people. There will be more people joining on board, but they'll still have that leadership and make sure everything runs smoothly. They know what they're doing. And we're thinking we'll use Google Drive to organize them. That's still not a definite thing, so if anybody has suggestions for better forums, but right now we're thinking that Google Docs might be the best way to sign people up and get a few people every day that we're bringing the food down to organize. And a big thing we just need to work out now is transportation, figuring out on days that the Landis van isn't going down, if there's any way to deliver the food ourselves. Some insurance issues come up with students just bringing their cars down. If anything happens, God forbid, that can bring up some problems. So we're trying to get school vans secured, but that's also still a work in progress. So we're still getting the ball rolling and figuring things out, but for the most part, it's run really smoothly so far, and we're really hopeful about what this will bring. So if anybody has any questions, I'd be happy to answer.
Thanks so much, Emma. We'll just wait a few seconds just to see if there's any questions from the people who are watching. All right, if not, I think that we're going to, oh, there's a question. It says, did you ever have problems getting help to collect the food?
Not a whole lot. If anything, that one week where there was nothing, it might have just been that dining services was really busy and wasn't able to collect the food for us. But besides those two little flukes that I mentioned, the group that's been planning it has been pretty consistent in making sure there's at least a couple people to bring the food from dining services to the van. So we really haven't had any huge issues. Everybody's really on board with making sure it runs smoothly. It's just been great.
That's awesome. Okay, so I think that, oh, someone said, how do you weigh sustainability factors such as gas to transport the food?
That's a good question. Well, food waste actually does emit methane. It's accountable for over 7% of greenhouse gas emissions. So we have thought about walking it, biking it, but it's a big hill, so bikes wouldn't be completely feasible. There is a school that does that, but we don't think we'd be able to, and not a lot of students on campus have bikes because it is so hilly. But you kind of have to weigh costs and benefits of hopefully this is offsetting whatever greenhouse gas emissions the food would have given off and whatever goes into it agriculturally also.
That's great. I actually, I know where Easton is. I know where Lafayette is. It's super hilly.
Yeah.
It would be really hard to use a bike. Somebody said, school children tend to go hungry in the summer. Do you deliver in the summer?
When there's food, yes. So the big events like commencement and the alumni weekend happened a couple weeks ago. So when those big events are happening, we are. Eric is still on campus, so he's still delivering food when there is any available. But most of the dining halls are shut. Any students who are staying on campus for the summer are mostly cooking for themselves. So there's not really a whole lot for us to bring down. Hopefully in the future, when if we do build a partnership with restaurants, we'll be able to get stuff from them. But currently, we're still not at that stage of it.
Yeah, of course. I mean, most college students aren't even around during the summer, so it'd be hard to do that. But it's great that you're making an effort even to do it during the summer. Okay, so it seems like there are no more questions. So if you want to, you can head off.
Okay.
Thank you so much. It was great learning about your food recovery program.
Thanks so much for having me.
Yeah, of course.
Bye.
Bye. Okay, so next we are going to have Kristen. I think she is presenting with someone, but if not, we're just going to have Kristen, which is great, from the University of Delaware, talking about her herbicide reduction campaign at her school. So Kristen, if you can turn on the camera, that would be great. I'll just wait a few seconds. All right. Seems like it's going. All right. Yay. Awesome. So this is Kristen and Sophie, I think. Yes. Okay. Okay. So I'll just turn off the camera and let you guys talk.
All right. Thanks, Lauren. Well, as Lauren said, my name is Kristen, and I'm Sophie, and we are from the University of Delaware. We are with the registered student organization, Students for the Environment, which is the largest and oldest environmental club that UD has. I am the current president, and Sophie is the current chair of our Green the Green committee, which is what we're going to be talking about today. Green the Green actually started 5 years ago in 2012, and what got it started was there is a professor at UD named McKay Jenkins. One day he decided to take his class out and sit outside in the grass for their lecture, and they noticed that the grounds crew was coming around and spraying pesticides, but they were covered in head-to-toe gear and protective equipment, whereas the students were just in normal clothes sitting on the green with their skin exposed to these very harsh chemicals that they were spraying. And so that's what started the student-led organization Green the Green. And right now we are actually in our second wave of Green the Green. The first wave of Green the Green happened, and that accomplished getting little signs posted every time that the grounds crews sprayed the pesticides onto the green. However, obviously this didn't stop the real problem of them spraying these toxic chemicals and exposing everyone to the chemicals. It was also very confusing, the signs. All it said was professionally treated. So no one really knew what that meant, and people would still go on the green right after it was sprayed, and a lot of people broke out in rashes, and there were just a lot of bad side effects to having these pesticides sprayed on the grass at UD. So like I said, we are currently in our second wave of Green the Green, and it's been a fight for us as students for the environment for a couple of reasons. One is that UD is known for the green. It's something that we take pride in. It's very aesthetically pleasing. So the grounds crew has been hesitant to make the switch because they're afraid that an organic lawn care program would cause a lot of like weeds and clovers and different things to pop up, which would make the green less aesthetically pleasing. And then another big problem that